All right, guys, welcome back to your Everything College Football podcast. Today, me and Nick are doing a preview and prediction for the MAC title game between rivals Miami of Ohio and the Bobcats from Athens. 2.5-point favorites are the Red Hawks, 44.5 to the total, 12 p.m. Eastern time on ESPN, that is, from Ford Field in Detroit, Michigan, home of the Detroit Lions. Looking at the Miami of Ohio offense, you start with Brett Gabbert. This guy's having a great year. Last year he was pretty solid for him, but this year he's really improved his production. 2,600 yards, 21 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. And I think the best thing about this passing attack is they have a lot more life compared to last year around this time, where they had Avion Smith after Gabbert went down with an injury, and he was certainly very limited as a passer. This year, though, they have three guys with almost 600-plus receiving yards. Cade McDonald's just shy of that mark at 589. And then you have 760 and 7 scores from Javon Tracy. And then Reggie Vigil leads the way with 787 yards and 9 scores on only 39 receptions. This is a nice passing attack. Nick Gabbert, he's a veteran leader. His brother, of course, played in the NFL for a little bit. So he certainly has a respectable mentor. And this is a guy whose completion percentage is a little bit over the place. It's only 58%. But for the most part, he's going to give you 200 yards per game and protect the football on occasion. But, for the most part, a lot of those interceptions happen across the first 5 games of the year. And they played 3 Power 4 opponents to start the season. So he doesn't really have a turnover problem, Nick. I think that was just the competition he was facing. He does have 3 over the last 2 weeks, but that's it over the last 2 months.
Yeah, I like this Gabbert quarterback a lot. I think he's a really solid MAC-level quarterback for this Miami, Ohio team, a team that, won the conference last year, looking to repeat, and they've had a decent year this year. When you're playing those tough Power 4 teams, obviously you can make a mistake or two. Last year I thought he had a decent season, but he's definitely played a lot better than he did last year in those 8 games. So far this season, with 2,600 yards passing, 21 touchdowns. Sure, the 10 picks is slightly concerning, but like you alluded to, some of those came against top-level opponents that this Miami, Ohio team played in the beginning of the season, so I'm not super worried about it. 57% comp rate certainly is a bit concerning, but overall, he's got his targets, he got his guys, his likes. We're going to rattle some of those names off in a second, but there's some solid pieces here that really can catch the ball for this team. I think Gabbert's a comfortable quarterback in the pocket. He looks confident. He's completing his passes most of the time, about 217 yards per game through the air. This passing offense overall, averaging roughly about 230 per game and about 2 touchdowns per game through the air. So this is a solid passing offense. I think he's a good quarterback that leads the way for this team.
You look at the rushing attack, they only put up 134 yards per game, but they've been greatly efficient for the most part down the stretch. In the first matchup against Ohio, they put up 5 yards per carry, 150 yards. For the most part, they really beat up this conference, certainly against some of the weaker opposition, but they've never exactly been stuck in the mud. The numbers aren't, I guess, the greatest, but Keon Mosley does have over 1,000 yards and 4 touchdowns, and he himself has been a pretty splendid player over the last 2 months. He has 100 yards in, 6 different games over those last 2 months. So, this is a guy who's going to be an efficient runner. They don't feed him a whole lot. They give him about double-figure carries, but only once has he eclipsed 20 carries this year. Very efficient back here. Both of these defenses are incredibly good against the run, Nick, but he faced them already once, had 7 yards per carry, 111 yards, and that includes a 58-yard touchdown in the third quarter. Really helped put this game away the first time. So I have no issues with this running game, even if the numbers don't be, they're all that eye-shattering.
I like this Mosey guy a lot. I think he's a really good back that's solid for this team. 1,050 yards on the year, 6.6 yards per carry, 4 touchdowns, about 87.1 yards per game. So not too far off that 100 yards per game mark. This team doesn't score a whole lot of rushing touchdowns. Jordan Brunson and Kevin Davis each have 2 rushing touchdowns, while Dylan Downing, a running back further down the depth chart, has 1 himself. So only 9 rushing touchdowns for this unit. They're definitely more of a scoring unit through the air. And again, we're going to highlight that in a second. But I think this Mosey guy is solid. I think he's a good back. About 160 attempts on the season, so they don't feed him particularly a whole lot, but he's effective when he gets the ball. 6.6 yards per carry is solid. Had a decent day against this Ohio team last time out. I think he'd have another strong day here and potentially be a key difference maker in this matchup in Detroit.
Look at the offensive line. This is about an average unit. They're shaky, but they certainly play hard. Left tackle Will Jados is a good run blocker, but horrid against in pass protection. John Young, the transfer from Kentucky, is a nice left guard for them. He's another average performer. Charlie Nank at center. He's probably going to be their best player. At right guard, Colby Borders, another one that really struggles in pass protection. And then right tackle, Reed Holsky, Him and the center are probably the best two linemen for them. Pretty average group here, Nick. Nothing too eye-shattering, but this isn't really an offensive line I don't think is going to cost you the game. I think they're going to play an adequate performance, and they've done quite well throughout the year in the MAC, but there was those issues in pass protection. Miami, though, they're unlikely to live in drop-back passing, about 27 attempts per game from Gabbert, but it's not going to be the identity of your offense. They're not going to be in second and third and 10 the entire game. I wouldn't imagine, but if they are, it might be a problem.
Solid average MAC offensive line, nothing really too crazy. This team's good in passing. This team's good at running the ball as well. This offensive line holds up in both pass block and run block. I think this is a solid unit overall.
Now we move forward to the Ohio offense. This is a group putting up 28.5 points per game. You start with Parker Navarro at quarterback. This is a guy that's coming off a great effort against Ball State. Had 169 yards and 3 touchdowns on 7 completions. Throughout the year, though, hasn't been all that great. 10 touchdowns, 10 picks, 175 yards per game. This isn't a team that likes to throw the football a whole lot. He does great things on the ground with 868 and 13 touchdowns. That's going to be, the identity of this offense is to pound the rock as much as possible. They don't have many options. Coleman Owen's a great receiver of over 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns. Other than that, though, it's not great. Chase Hendricks has 392 on the year. Rodney Harris has 246. And, freshman tight end Mason Williams has 16 reps for 161 yards. Only 2 touchdowns combined between those last 3 names I read off. There's not many targets to be commanded here outside of Coleman Owen, Nick. This is an Ohio passing attack. They're not great at throwing the ball, about 22 attempts per game. The efficiency is great. They're able to hit a lot of big plays, but for the most part, this is a team that cannot really methodically move the ball downfield. Only 88 passing yards and 2 picks for Navarro in the first matchup. That's horrendous. That's got to be a lot better.
This is an offense that's not great at throwing the ball. They're really a weak passing offense when you consider it. Below 2,000 yards passing for Navarro, 10 touchdowns, 10 picks. Just nothing really that great from him so far this season. His one target, Coleman Owen, has been really good, 1,000 yards, 16.6 and 7 scored. But outside of him, really not a whole lot going on. If you can put him in good coverage and really lock him down, it's going to be a tough day. And we saw that this Ohio offense had a bad day through the air against Miami in the first matchup. I'm expecting a similar matchup here for them. This team obviously lives and dies by the run, and they certainly have some talented pieces, but I don't know how well that will benefit them in this matchup against Miami, Ohio here.
And that's the biggest red flag, is this is a really good rushing attack. There's 200-plus yards in 4 of the last 5 games. They also had 200-plus rushing in 2 consecutive contests before they faced against Miami, where they only had 110 yards rushing on 33 attempts. And they were pretty much stifled as much as you could be. Navarro, of course, alluded to his abilities as a runner. Anthony Tyus, the lead back here of 960 and 8 touchdowns. He's an efficient, productive back, and Ricky Hunt's a nice number 2. So they have guys here that can certainly hurt you. A lot of speed option, Nick. There's going to be a lot of control from this quarterback. Him and Tyus are going to be the 1-2 punch throughout the game. They're going to have a strong effort here. But just like the passing attack, when they first the Red Hawks defense the first time, they were not able to do anything on the ground.
The script is pretty simple for Ohio. Run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. See if you can find success doing so. Anthony Tyus, a guy that you could look out for his name in the portal once this is all wrapped up for Ohio, once their season's done. Maybe a guy that tries to get a bigger jump to a bigger program. He's a really talented back. 960 for him on the year, 5.2 yards per carry, 8 scores. Has a ton of attempts, 184, so obviously they're going to continue to run the ball. Navarro himself, you alluded to his stats, 868, 6.6, and 13 scores for him. Really solid. Ricky Hunt, the backup back, has 2 touchdowns and 365 yards. He gets involved occasionally as well. This team can run the ball effectively, and they're certainly going to want to do that. They're going to try to run the ball as much as possible. Over 200 yards per game this season, 2.4 touchdowns per game as well. We saw them struggle against Miami, Ohio last time out. I think it's certainly something that's probably going to replicate itself, but if they can find a way to run the ball, then this Ohio team is a very scary team, and they could run away with this one.
Now you look at an offensive line that's just around the same as the Red Hawks, maybe a little bit better. Pass pro, left tackle Davion Witherspoon, hasn't allowed a sack this year, but, he certainly has his own issues. It's been a revolving door at left guard. Trent Allen's going to be your main guy. At center, you look at Parker Titsworth. He's the best player, I'd say, up front. He's also had a bit of an underwhelming season. Christopher Atkinson at right guard's having a pretty great year. And then right tackle Jacob Dennison. He's a little bit more consistent in pass protection, but it's also a position that's seen numerous different players get the go. These MAC offensive lines, Nick, they're nothing spectacular, but these guys are tough. You see what weather they play on a weekly basis, and these guys can certainly play football. I think it'll be a physical affair all around. I don't think anyone's going to be too out of line here up front for Ohio.
Parker Titsworth, a guy that's got an all-time name in college football, but is a great player for this team as well. A really good key piece at center, a guy that's a big veteran leader for this team. Having a solid season, I do like what they have at the two guards. I think Witherspoon and Atkinson are two solid pieces. Again, a MAC offensive line, what you're going to get out of these. They're big physical guys that can really stand up to the test. Playing in a dome, so the weather obviously not a big effect for them up in Detroit. These are good physical guys, though. I trust both these offensive lines. I think these are both really good units.
When you look at the Miami of Ohio defense, giving up only about 17 points per game. They've been great against the run in conference play, holding opponents to 92.6 yards per play. A lot of these numbers are juiced because early on in the year they played Cincinnati, they played Notre Dame. Those are two opponents that were certainly able to run it up a little bit. They still held them to under 30 points, though, Nick. So even though they started off 0-3, I was still confident they'd be the favorite in this conference, and they've certainly proven that point to be true with their ability here to be physical and strong against the run. You start off a great defensive end, Brian Ugwu. 14 TFL, his 7.5 sacks. This guy is a do-it-all performer up front. Corey Suttle has been productive. Savio Frazier as well. Nazir Washington. This is a nice defensive line. They get after it. Adam Trick as well. What do you make of this D-line, Nick? They also have Kobe Hilton, who's a nice player. Washington, though, he's been an elite run defender, and Ugwu has been incredibly productive. This is a great group.
Brian Ugwu is a fantastic player. 50 total tackles for him as a defensive line piece, 14 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks for him, 2 pass breakups. Great numbers there. Corey Suttle, I really like him a lot as well. 29 total tackles for him, 8 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks, good numbers. Nasir Washington is a solid run stopper who's really good at clogging those holes. 29 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 3 pass breakups. Savion Frazier's a guy I like as well, underrated piece. 20 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, 2 pass breakups. And definitely a very underrated piece that people should be keeping an eye on is Kobe Hilton, who's been good in rotational reps at times. 15 total tackles, 1 tackle for loss, a guy to keep an eye on to have a good game here, in my opinion. I like this defensive line, a good unit. They're good against the run, like you said, stop holding opponents to 100 yards per game, under 100 yards per game this season. A very physical unit that gets a nice amount of tackles for loss as well. I like what this unit can do.
Now you look at the middle of this defense, you got 2 great veteran linebackers, Matt Solopek and Ty Wise. And Nick, I know you remember talking about these guys last year. They had 160 plus combined tackles. Not as productive this year because Wise has been a little beat up, but Salopek still has 106. Wise, 5th on the team, was 63. 8.5 TFL for him as well. Matt, he's having a great year. He's 7.5 tackles for loss, 3 pass breakups, and 3 interceptions. These are as good as you're going to get in this conference at linebacker. I think these guys are tremendous. Salopek is phenomenal in coverage. Wise isn't that bad either. I'm pretty sure he had an interception last week. These guys are good against the run. They're efficient tacklers. I mean, this is how you play football. The MAC does it right with these 2 right here, Nick. These guys are outstanding individuals, and they certainly help put the conference on the MAC as tough football players.
If you listen to this podcast, you know I love linebackers who absolutely stuff the stat sheet, and Salopek's one of those guys. 106 total tackles this year. 8 tackles for loss, a sack, 3 picks, 3 pass breakups. Really good numbers. Ty Wise, another guy I really like from this conference. 6'3 total tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, a pick, and a pass breakup. Do it all kind of guys. Really good in coverage. Really good in the middle there. They patrol that defense really well. I like how they look in this the multiple defensive schemes that this defense runs. I like both these guys a lot. Expect big days of these 2 linebackers.
Then you look at a secondary. It's probably not going to be tested all that much. I mean, the only threat we talked about was Coleman Owen, Rayon Strader, Luke Evans. Evans hasn't been all that great at corner. Strader, though, he's going to be your top guy here. William Hadrick, he'll get on the field a good bit. This is kind of an average secondary. Just haven't really been tested too much. They just play so much good football in the front 7 that allows the secondary to thrive. Cialis Walters, he's a slot corner who's been great. Salopek will play in the slot a lot because he's got that type of versatility. And then safety Eli Blankley, he's going to be your top guy in the full back end. He's a good run defender. He's been a nice tackler as well. Again, this isn't a secondary that's been tested too much this year. Have 11 interceptions compared to only 7 TDs they've allowed. And in the first matchup, they completely dominated, only giving up, 181 yards as a team. But 88 to Parker Navarro, the starter, and they had him completely in flux the entire game. They've dominated this conference, though, Nick. What do you think of the secondary that probably won't be tested too much?
A little bit higher on the secondary than you are. I think this is a really good unit. It's got some solid pieces. I think Eli Blankley is a good leader. 85 total tackles, tackle for loss, a pick and a pass breakup. Cialis Walters is really good. 79 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 11 pass breakups for him. Rayon Strader has been really good for this team as well. 50 total tackles, 2 picks, 17 pass breakups. He's a really good coverage asset. Luke Evans, 25 total tackles, 3 pass breakups. Michael Yarborough, who is a little bit banged up, but he's still a solid piece for this defense. 23 total tackles, 2 pass breakups, and William Hendrick has been solid for this team at times. 22 total tackles, 4 pass breakups. I think it's a good secondary, a solid unit overall, some really good pieces.
Now you move to an Ohio defense that's statistically even better against the run in conference, only about 80 yards per game. They've completely stifled their opponents. The only one that had success was this team they're facing back on the 19th of October with those 150 yards. But, they've played incredibly good football, holding teams to, under 2 yards per carry in 3 out of the last 4 contests. This is a team that plays tough physical ball. Bradley Weaver off the edge. He's going to be your top guy. Ben McNabu, he's also great. He's a phenomenal pass rusher. You look at some of these other guys in the rotation. Marcel Walker-Burgess is very efficient. C.J. Doggett, a veteran. Braylon Henderson, a nice guy on the interior. And Chris Mayfield and Chris Rice kind of round out this rotation. This team has some nice edges, Nick. 30 sacks for them compared to the 29 for their opposition. I mean, these teams are incredibly similar in this front seven. What do you think of Ohio that's looking for redemption after a tough sledding in the first go?
A good run defense that struggled against one team, Miami, Ohio. It's the only team they struggled against. Otherwise, holding opponents under 100 yards per game as well. A really big physical unit. Marcel Walker's been good. 52 total tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, 2 pass breakups. Good numbers there. Ben McAdoo has been really solid as well. 38 total tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks. Bradley Weaver's been really good for his team. 36 total tackles, 13 tackles for loss, 8 sacks for him. CJ Doggett, 28 total tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. Cam Rice, 27 total tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 3 sacks for him as well. Carden Schmidt, Braylon Henderson have been solid as well. 27 total tackles for Schmidt, 3 tackles for loss for him. Braylon Henderson, 23 and 2 for him. While Chris Mayfield's been okay in rotational reps, 8 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss. A big physical unit. They have a tough test here, certainly. Can they stand up to it? I think it's certainly possible. If Ohio is going to win this game, they have to be strong in the trenches and win the battle against the run defense.
They look at the middle of their defense. They also have a nice sound linebacking duo in Blake Leak and Shea Taylor, 73 tackles and then 63 respectively. These guys are good players, right? They're really good against the run, but they're not as effective in coverage. They're not as productive, and I'm not as confident in their abilities compared to the group on the other side. Shea Taylor does have 9.5 TFL this year. Leak only has 3. What do you make of this part of the defense, Nick? Because they're still good, no slouch, but compared to the opposition, they're not as good.
Yeah, decent unit here. Definitely not as good as the Miami, Ohio unit, but still a unit that I think has some solid pieces. Blake Lackey is a really solid player for this team. 73 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss. And then Taylor, 63 total tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, and a pick 6, 4 pass breakups for him. Decent enough linebacker unit, in my opinion.
Now we move to the Ohio secondary. This is a group that's also not as great as the Red Hawks. Tank Pearson's a pretty good corner. Roman Parodi, he's also having a great year. I think these guys have good coverage ability. It's really going to come down to what you can do in the slot. DJ Walker's having a good year in coverage. Not that great of a tackler, though. Adonis Williams will share time with him. And then you have 2 safeties in Dustin Johnson and DJ Walker. These guys have been horrendous tacklers all year long. Walker's a pretty solid coverage asset. Johnson not as much. This is a Miami Ohio offense that does have a couple of options at receiver that can hurt you downfield, Nick. So I think they're going to let these corners maybe get a go in terms of man coverage. But in terms of zone, they might get picked apart a little bit.
They might get picked apart a little bit in zone, but overall still a solid unit. I think this is a tough test for them because Gabbert's a pretty accurate quarterback at times and is certainly rounding into form as we get closer to the end of the season. Johnson, the safety for this team, 67 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 3 pass breakups for him. DJ Walker, 48 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, a pick and 7 pass breakups. Parodi has been solid as well, 43 total tackles, a pick and 9 pass breakups. Tank Pearson, 41 total tackles, 6 pass breakups for him as well. Austin Brawley has been solid for this team, 33 total tackles, 2 pass breakups. And Adonis Williams has been good, 28 total tackles and 3 pass breakups for him. Overall, these are 2 really good defenses, right? There's nothing you can say to take away from that. I think the Miami, Ohio defense is better, but overall, I think this is a good Ohio defense as well. These are 2 productive units against the run, and overall, 2 really good defense going at it in the MAC title game.
In the first meeting, Gabbert had 178 and 3 touchdowns at almost 70%. So, they had the ideal balance. And then the secondary got gashed against Ball State this past weekend, who was playing from behind, but they were able to really have some big plays throughout the game through the air. Moving to tail of the tape. Look at the team comparisons. I think running back and O-line are even. The rest of the edges will go to the Red Hawks. I just don't have it in me to really find any in favor of Ohio, Nick. Definitely not linebacker. I think the secondary for Red Hawks is better. I think their D-line could potentially be swapped. I don't think so, though. I'm not going to go with that. And then I think wide receiver and QB are pretty clear edges as well. What are your thoughts on these?
I think this is a fair tale of the tape. This is a really good team that you have for Miami, Ohio, and I think these teams are, not too far off each other. But when you look at the end of the day, this is a really strong roster that Miami, Ohio has put together here. They're going to win a lot of games right now, and I think they're going to win this battle head to head for me. I like what Miami, Ohio can do. I think they're tail of the tape. I think this is a fair and balanced tail of the tape because I think Miami is just a better team on paper. Not too far behind is Ohio, but overall, I think the edges make a lot of sense.
Well, the final thoughts on the prediction keys to the game. For Miami, you keep playing stiff defense, let Gabbert methodically move the ball downfield. And for Ohio, the pass game needs to find some production. Pass rush needs to make some plays. Nick, your score is exactly what I had originally. I went ahead and flipped it down a little bit because I just don't see Ohio being able to score 2 touchdowns. In this first meeting, Miami at home, of course, they're at a neutral site now, which, I think being at a neutral site might play into your favor because you guys are used to playing in tough wind and snow and all that, and now the weather conditions won't be a factor, and we can let the better teams be decided. They're up 30-6 at the end of 3 quarters. Ohio scored a TD with 6 minutes to go, and then one with 6 seconds left to make it a 10-point loss. This game was over, though, well before that. They, quite frankly, blew out Ohio, Nick. This is a team that plays with pretty efficient offense. This defense is so hard to crack. We seen it last year in a conference title game. They were like 8-point underdogs, maybe even more than that, and they beat Toledo by double figures with great, tough defense that was able to make strong plays. This is a good Redhawks team. Chuck Martin's doing a great job, Nick, and I think the Redhawks at 2.5-point favorites, they're going to cover that with ease, but this conference seems to be all over the place, and maybe those conditions not being a factor will play into the favor of the Bobcats, maybe not so much the Redhawks.
This is an interesting matchup in the MAC title game. Both these teams are very red hot right now. And if you want a reason to pick Ohio, they're playing better football arguably than Miami is. When you look at the recent results for Ohio, they scored 42 against Ball State, 24 against Toledo, 35 against Eastern Michigan, 41 against Kent State, and 47 against Buffalo. They blew out these opponents. The most points they've given up for that 5-game stretch was 21 to Ball State in a game they won by 21. So they've been running up the score, beating teams. They shut out Kent State 41-0. So this Ohio team's rounding into form, playing good football. Miami, Ohio has also won 5 games in a row, but they had a scare against Ball State on the road. Also played a closer than expected game against Bowling Green over the Thanksgiving holiday weekend. In general, though, I think this is a better Miami team on paper. This is an interesting matchup. This is a rivalry, the Battle of the Bricks, a rivalry that goes back to 2 oldest schools in the state of Ohio. Both these teams have a history of being in the conference title game. Miami's appeared in 6, Ohio's appeared in 5, but Ohio's never won the conference. They've lost all 5 of their appearances in the conference title game, including most recently in 2022. While, of course, the Red Hawks are defending champions last year, and they have 3 additional titles to that, looking to add a 5th and win 2 in a row. I'll take them to get that 5th title, win 2 in a row. I think this team's just too good on offense and too good on defense. I think Gabbert really is that good of a quarterback against this defense. We've seen him have success before. I think they'll jump out to an early lead. The defense will be strong. I think the under, is in play. I like the under in this game. I think you like the under as well in this game. I could see Ohio getting a touchdown or 2 late to kind of, balance out that score a little bit in garbage time, but I'm still taking Miami with the points here. Like the Redhawks a lot in this one.
Yeah, under for sure. In Miami, they went on the road against a good Bowling Green team on Friday, and they completely held them in check on offense. They couldn't do anything. Beat them 28-12. That was pretty handily. That was a pretty decisive victory. So I think this will be a good game. Nice defensive affair between 2 teams that are coached the right way. They play the game the correct way, Nick, like what these coaches have done, staying put at their respective MAC schools, and they're seeing big dividends here. Underrated contest. Some people might not care about, but this is good football at the end of the day.
Certainly worth the game watching. Very cool they played in Ford Field, in my opinion. A solid neutral site for a lot of these smaller conferences play on campuses. I like having a neutral site playing in the Dome. Sometimes you get good attendance as well. I think it's a reward for playing and fighting in your conference to play in an NFL stadium and really get that opportunity to be with your fans. Cool matchup here. I think, battle in-state battle of the bricks, a really exciting game. It's certainly worth tuning in that early slate, maybe split screen that between the Big 12 title game and the MAC title game. 2 good games going on at noon.
Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.